And so Rasha's already introduced my fellow panelists, and I'm going to quickly just provide some background context, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. So again, we've talked a lot about automation and AI and other technologies today. In this panel, we're going to talk about how to leverage automation and AI to essentially build the roadmap to intelligent automation, which then drives transformation within the organization. So AI by itself is a very broad umbrella term, which has many different uses and applications. From IBM's Watson being able to actually diagnose diseases to now AI engines that can actually develop code automatically or read unstructured data through deep learning and so on. But in our context, what we're going to talk about today, I think the AI is a little bit more on a practical level. On this slide, I'm just going to cover a couple of slides quickly. First of all, automation and AI are fast becoming the most transformational building blocks for essentially organizations that want to go through this digital transformation. And if you look at AI in itself is a complex set of building blocks, right, comprising of all these different discrete tools out there that kind of work together. We call it the AI hive because they're sort of interwoven in different ways. They're woven to create different kinds of solutions, right? You have natural language processing, you have chatbots now, semantic engines, you have cognitive reasoning engines, you have swarm intelligence, and so on and so forth. So AI is being leveraged in different ways depending on the use case. Intelligent automation, again, in the context that we're going to talk about today, is the way to use AI layered on top of RPA and automation to essentially improve business processes dramatically and improve customer experience in a very radical way. And again, as you know, we, as consultants, we all love roadmaps. I think Gregory talked about that earlier. So again, this whole process of automation that we're seeing right now, we're still in very early stages of it, where essentially we're looking at back office operations around F&A, HR, customer ops. But as tools become more mature and as we leverage more and more of cognitive analytics and AI capabilities, we're going up that value curve and bringing in more core operations and bringing in revenue-generating functions into the scope. And that's where you start really seeing the true benefit of intelligent automation. So with that, I'm going to turn to my panelists here, and I'm going to pose my first question. RPA, again, is now a reality, and we've heard even from Bert earlier today about successful implementation. But is AI ready for prime time? Is it industrial strength yet? Are you actually able to practically implement AI-enabled solutions? Starting with you, Rohan.
Thanks, Anupam. So definition of AI is still emerging. So I would differentiate between AI and what I would call as cognitive automation. So if you think about robotics, and especially robotics process automation, then you're able to automate mundane processes, whether it is creating your timesheets, creating your T&E, doing other processes within your organization, data processing, and so on. When you start looking at cognitive, now you start taking into account the different layers. So can you use machine learning to look at mortgage loan documents and be able to not only detect what the document is, but also be able to look at all of the data within those documents? Or you start looking at loan collateral, especially in the financial services industry, asset-based lending. Are you able to now eliminate through computer vision, through machine learning, provide the robots the ability to extract all of that data and make sure that you no longer need the quality assurance and the quality control functions that were originally done by people, which were prone to errors. So if you look at cognitive automation, then you start going into the other band of AI where now you're using predictive modeling to look at which of the customers, which of our clients, especially within banking and financial services, are going to potentially default on loans. Is there a way that you can meet with them, engage with them early enough, and then be able to provide those services, and that would be a value differentiator. So if you think about that spectrum, those solutions are there. I think they are beyond just the prototyping phase into actually implementation right now, and they're somewhere between industrialization versus prototyping. So I think I would say that that's where we are in this particular continuum.
So, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah. So Anupam, I may have a slightly different take, but those companies that are heavily invested in marketing and consumer facing have invested millions and millions of dollars and all kinds of IT resources, which many companies, maybe financial service type companies, don't have the luxury of doing. To move into what I would truly call AI, cognitive intelligent automation, where you've got virtual agents that can answer questions and learn and deal with your customers and provide a better customer experience, takes a key focus from your leadership that this is the direction we want to go, and a huge investment in time and resource. As Rohan was pointing out, you know, there are steps in between in terms of machine learning, recognition of voice and data and images, and being able to learn from that and become better, and the quality of the work improves with time as your processes learn with you. So, you know, for me, definitely possible, but not for the large spectrum of enterprises that that many of us work in.
So I'll build on to what both Rohan and Bert said, and I'll give you more of a product company perspective. For us, I think the way RPA needs to be looked at is pretty much mimicking human behavior at like, you know, RPA 101, right? So you have the ability of the bots to pretty much do whatever a human user does, which until now was, you know, restricted by both the type of inputs you have. So the input had to be extremely rigid and standardized, right? So if the invoice number was not 2 inches right from the top corner, it would miss it, to what now having flex capture available where anywhere on the screen, you know, the data can be captured, to the next stage where not just mimicking, but it also kind of records and registers what you repeatedly do, so it can play back to you, say, you know, here's a pre-built automation, do you want to use this? Instead of trying to do it all over again, because, you know, 100 other customers have already done the same AP or order management automation elsewhere. Or to the next stage where it's cognitive, where now people speak into Alexa, for instance, so you no longer have just inputs coming in the form of invoices. You have voice recorded messages coming in as input. So does the bot have the ability to recognize that input and, you know, translate that into every other action that you've already recorded? Or finally, into getting into processes that you so far thought were not automatable. So, you know, traditionally the RPA outlook was dumb down a process. It's extremely repeatable, rule-based, voluminous. Sure, the bot can do it, right? But if you want to have a lot of exceptions, either you got to teach all those exceptions to the bot, or, you know, you're going to have a human intervention happening all the time. The bot's raising its hands to say, I don't know what to do in this case, and so on. To a case where now the bots are learning enough where they bring it close to your human decision. Maybe they're 80% close to what a human would have done, which is good enough in most cases. And so, you know, that could be the kind of the trajectory that we see. But if you ask me, we don't necessarily view AI in exactly those kind of phases. So computer vision, right, is AI too. Now, if you look at the way bots are, or any software is coded, how do you tell a computer to do something, right? If it has to go from here to maybe touch that speaker, you say take exactly 10 steps, and then, you know, see something which is black of this dimension, and then click on it, or whatever, right? It's extremely specific. Now, instead, you and I as humans, you know, when you look at my iPhone, let's say the Google Maps icon is row number 2, column number 3, right? Imagine this was in Japanese. Would you still be able to spot it? Unless maybe you have a tether, like you recognize the icon and not necessarily the words Google Map, right? So our bots, for instance, are able to not just see every pixel on the screen, but also attach a meaning to it. So that next time the position changes, it's no longer only looking at that particular position, but it's essentially looking for that word or icon, etc., on the screen. So just like a human thinks, which in itself is a big leapfrog in terms of AI. Right? So when you have that sort of a foundation that the product can see what you want it to see, then it's easy to build on cognitive and AI and everything else on top of it. But if a bot is fundamentally blind or has blurred vision, it's going to be only that much effective.
Yeah, so essentially if processes that are very deterministic, inputs and outputs are well defined and rules-based, then automation obviously applies. But where there is a fuzzy logic implied, which means the input is not well determined, it could be unstructured data, and the output also could not be very predictable. It's kind of decision-based. That's where AI starts coming into the picture. So again, as we're seeing now that a lot of companies, as they're maturing in their automation efforts, they're now bringing in machine learning, cognitive, and AI into their realm. So how do you see from your personal experience, maybe starting with you, Rohan, of layering AI with some of your automation efforts? How are you practically going about that?
So automation is the core building block. So if you think about labor, just manual labor, at some point in time, I'll give you two examples. One is where we would have had to hire close to 100 people to build out presentations that our bankers can take to the clients that they meet, especially small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses. So we decided that we weren't going to do that. It was a 30 to 40-page PowerPoint deck that we decided that we would have our robots churn out. Now, today, what we've done is the banker or their assistant is simply able to go into a SharePoint site and essentially place an order with the name of the customer, and the robot is smart enough to go pull it from Salesforce. Where we're going next is, and this is what we're implementing, is why do we even need someone to go into a SharePoint site and place an order? We need a chat bot to simply say, hey, please build me my financial insights presentation for customer A. That intelligence now should already be there to understand who am I as a banker. Customer A, is it customer A in Texas because I manage the Texas region, or am I in Florida? So build the right presentation, pull the data that is available in our CRM systems, in our financial systems such as Moody's and so on, aggregate any other information from the industry that may be relevant, and over time that intelligence will continue to evolve and develop. And so this is something that we're rolling out. Initially, you started off with robotics, which is just automate the mundane task of putting together 30 pages in PowerPoint, aggregated from about 5 or 6 systems. Now you're giving it more intelligence, so not only to take the orders, but also to expand it, where it can start pulling in more intelligence in terms of what happened about this particular business, what are the competitors, and so on. So that's just one example. If you look at ServiceNow tickets, most of us use ServiceNow as our ticketing system. People have to submit a ticket. We can have Amelias of the world and different other platforms that can simply look at applications and look at what the ticket trending history has been. And then as you're chatting with the chatbot, they can immediately tell you that the challenge or the problem is with your hard drive, or that you need a different laptop, or you need a particular service patch, or if they can't resolve it, they will dispatch a technician to you. From a user perspective, your entire interface has changed. All you need to do is you need to chat with the chatbot or speak to it, and immediately your problem is resolved. So that roadmap is being built. It is being actively pursued by many organizations, and that is really going to let us, I think, to what Kevin said, free us up to do what we really need to do from a process standpoint.
So, Rohan, that's a great example, and one we're also looking at, and it's because there is a ton of knowledge content captured in all the tickets. You have the data in terms of all the different scenarios that your users come up with every day, and it's continuously refreshed. So that is a perfect example where you could put a chatbot in place. And with the knowledge content accessible and updated regularly, you could create a much quicker, more agile responding service network for your employees or your customers.
I'm the last guy, so they kind of answered it very well for me. But I think the only other thing I would add is, I guess newer dimensions come out than what we start off thinking with, right? So the traditional outlook is, I need to get cost savings out of AI, RPA, what have you. But unknowingly, we also find compliance, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction come out as collateral, impact of all this. Many times we find, we had a case with one of the large retailers, I can't name them yet, but they started off with using our bots to essentially have all their call center agents, right? Where every time a customer calls in, let's say this is about eligibility for their health care claims, right? The first thing it does is, the first, 40-odd seconds, we all experience it. The agent would never even get to your issue. They'd ask you your name, your mom's name, your dog's name, whatever else, right? Just credentialize to see if it is you, right? And then the next stage, when they're on the phone with you, they put you on a hold, at least for a minute, because they got to go and get your data out of multiple systems, et cetera, et cetera. But then in the process, what we found was they were also not asking certain questions that they were legally supposed to ask. They were set of 10 to 12 questions. It became a compliance issue. That it was not about just about how many minutes that you save on that call, but it's also about, did you fully do what you're supposed to. So the bots now not only take care of the credentialing or helping you go out, get all the data from different databases, they also force you to ask those questions which you did not. So multiple different ways in which companies are figuring out that the benefits to RPA and AI. So to the earlier points made, I think then it feeds into the knowledge bank that you tend to build up. But RPA fundamentally, I think, helps you clean up your house. It forces you to basically look at processes that are being done so differently, makes you, say, no, it has to be done in one way. So you first take that as a candidate. And then you start to say, all right, I've seen this performed, to your point about COEs earlier. Brilliant point about, why do I have to do it all over again? Somebody's already done it in the business, so start off from there and then make it better.
Yeah. Well, that leads to my next question, which is, how do you measure the ROI from AI? Because, again, with automation, the output is well-defined. You're reducing certain number of FTEs or getting certain productivity boosts. In the case of AI, as the outcome's a little bit more fuzzy, how do you go about actually tracking those outcomes and measuring ROI?
I'll say there are four things that we definitely look at. Number one is it going to enhance revenue, or is it going to enhance client experience? And is there a tangible way to measure it? That's number one. Second, obviously, focus is on costs, efficiencies, productivity, which is kind of obviously the one that stands out at everyone. Then the two other dimensions are a little tricky. The third one, especially being operating in a highly compliance-driven and regulatory industry, financial services, are we able to improve our operational controls, whether it is SOX related or whether it is any other form of operational controls that can really benefit from AI and automation? And the last one, which is even a little more fuzzier, is really about experimentation. So I don't believe in science experiments, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of these AI prototypes end up being science experiments. But what we need to do is demonstrate proof of value. So start small, especially as you start looking at, do you want a new loan loss forecasting model to be your next AI machine learning model? Or do you want to look at some sort of documentation that comes in from various sources to verify incomes from your clients? So start small, design the experiment well, and only move forward if it demonstrates enough value. So if you look at those four levers, you should be able to justify the means. And then obviously you need your CFO organization to be right behind you, because if they're funding it, then the CFO organization needs to make sure that the benefits are being realized.
Your turn.
All right, thank you. I guess we've seen a variety of benefits that have come out, right? So usually the way to look at ROI is simply, what is the cost of a bot, and then how many people did it replace, right? That's a very straight math, sure. But oftentimes, I think the point is lost in that bots are not all about replacing people. typically our unattended bots, as we call it, which run without any human intervention, the ratio we've seen is somewhere around 3 to 5 people that it can replace, right? Simply because it runs 3 cycles in a day, never has any HR issues, no sick days, whatever. But you also have the attended bots where you can use them as digital personal assistants to do, let's say 30% of your day-to-day activity is mundane, but the rest of it is all judgment-oriented, then you get the bots to do that portion, so you make people more efficient. Now, if you were to sit down and say, well, I didn't really replace that person, sure, you could maybe say 30% of that person's cost is X or Y, but the real ROI is in the momentum that it builds up. So we had a couple of cases, right? This was, I think, with the GSA, with the federal government. Every day, they get at least about 1,000 to 2,000 requests from vendors that want to get onboarded to their system. It's a very simple 3-step process. When you get the request, you go to the website of the vendor, look for the DUNS number, put it on your internal system to validate it to see if it's really a vendor as they claim and so on, and then whatever, that process ends there, right? Now this process is being done by federal agents all over the place, all over the US. The point is about the multitude. You multiply that with whatever, how many ever agents, right? Thousands of agents that you employ, spending that time, that's one factor. But this spurred the GSA then to start looking at everything else that had repetitive functions, right? So I think that momentum is extremely important. Or you have a mortgage processor we have as a client. They take about 46 days on a standard basis to close approvals. Now, because of applying our bots, they actually shortened the last stage of every process, which was about 4 days extra, because they had to run certain reports with an external agency every single time. Now, the customers were getting the approvals 4 days earlier. The employees were going home earlier on the quarter ends because this used to be a quarterly feature. Every time they would have to work late simply because these reports had to be run, right? So multiple different ways in which you start to see benefits coming in, and then it really spurs you to think, all right, have I really thought about every other case? So that would be my take.
So, as an ex-finance person, automation, machine learning, there's certain benefits that are easy to get your hands around. And by the nature of automation, you're going to generate productivity, labor savings. But really, when you get into this space, and a lot of it's customer facing, it's about revenue, customer experience, customer stick, and one of the points Rohan and Arjun brought up was around compliance and security. A lot of what our both front office and back office operations do is authenticate who you are, make sure you're not a fraudster, and there's triggers for that. You think about, I don't know how many of you have had to replace your credit cards, but that's probably a robot that raised a red flag, and then your card activity was stopped. So from a compliance and security standpoint, typically your weakest link is people. Not because they're bad people, but because they can be tricked through social engineering or email phishing or countless other ways that could expose data or your company to serious risk. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, you don't want to go down that path because it will cost you hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to repair damage that can be done from a compliance and security standpoint.
Okay, so maybe continuing with you, Bert, when selecting automation tools now, are you looking at their AI capabilities as well in terms of their product roadmap? Is that now an important criteria in the process?
So it's a journey for sure, and we're moving into more of the customer-facing space. Now, our IT teams that are working on applications and things, they're working on a lot of stuff around data analytics, APIs, figuring out ways to work better with your customers. They're also looking at AI and predictive sciences, but we can do some of that as well in operations, in finance, and HR. So to your question, yes, we are, but it is a journey, and it's not one that there's a destination.
Yeah. Rohan, to you, maybe a slightly different question. How do you look to leverage your existing ecosystem of vendors to bring in AI and automation capabilities?
So I think the question really is, or the answer really revolves around where your existing ecosystem of vendors has the right operating model to support you. I think where models for, if you think about intelligent automation across the spectrum, you've got robotics, and then towards the right, you have true AI cognitive with machine learning somewhere in the middle. And then you could either put natural language generation, natural language processing on either side of it. So if you think about that spectrum, pure RPA use cases are pretty simple. So you could pick an RPA platform provider and then think about it as a platform and look at monetizing that platform with as many use cases as you can, depending upon your licensing model. Now, the challenge there is you will not be able to, unless your RPA platform has got cognitive abilities, you will only be able to do certain use cases. You will not be able to do what I call as hybrid use cases. For example, taking the natural language or elements of natural language and implementing chatbots on top of that, and then those chatbots then trigger the RPA robots to go do whatever it is that a person would have done. So as you start looking at the spectrum, you now have to figure out, do you require a platform that can do better natural language processing, or a chatbot platform or a virtual agent platform, like Casisto, IPsoft, Amelia, Nuance. I mean, there are a couple of vendors in that space, and some of these are, in the fintech space as well that are really innovating. Clink is one provider that is doing significant amount of work. So we are right now in the middle of looking at, should we have a platform strategy or should we have a product strategy in terms of looking at individual products and then build use cases on that, and then stitch it all together through some sort of system integration, some sort of API layer that we own and we build internally within the bank. So those are all things that we should consider, and we are actively looking into that right now. So not a real good answer, but again, think about it as, do you want one platform from a provider that can provide you everything, or do you want sort of best of the breed, and then you as a company figure out what parts, pieces, and components operate together in your ecosystem, and then you stitch it together with a layer of APIs that are highly efficient and sustainable.
Yeah, and also whether that provider is going to continually innovate and stay ahead of the curve,
Right.
or would you rather work with a pure play technology, vendor whose core business is to continue to innovate, right? So Arjun, maybe a bit of an opportunity to plug UiPath. Maybe in very quick way, if you can talk a little bit about how UiPath is going about evolving its roadmap and incorporating more AI capabilities into its current tool set.
Sure. And I kind of want to touch upon what Rohan said earlier. I think in terms of identifying or selecting a vendor, especially in the RPA space, the way I would say it is three broad factors. The first and foremost, I think, is trust, right? So the product has to be able to do what we say it can do. You have a lot of product companies out there that are claiming we are first in AI, we are first in cognitive, and so on. We don't want to be first in anything. We want to be the best in it, right? So if it takes time, it takes time, because the building blocks have to be strong. You're dealing with customers' functions, so you better have it deliver. The second thing is network of partners. We as a product company want to stay a product company. We don't want to dabble into implementation, into advisory and everything else, because that's not our cup of cake. We have partners like Avasant and a whole lot of service providers in the audience too that we partner with, which is important to that ecosystem. So we all know what our respective functions are. And thirdly, I think the way we've gone about innovation, and that'll answer your question as well, Anupam, is it's all about collective innovation, right? So it's almost like three things into one. We are like the iPhone, where it is extremely simple to use. Automation on our product is clearly 40% faster and easier than any other product in the market, as claimed not by us, but Walmart, GE, HP, Pepsi, and the list goes on, and probably Bert can endorse that too. Right? And the second thing is about keeping it open source, like a Google. the whole world is open out there to build automation on our product. Our training is free, our product is free to download. You build your bots, you buy it when you're convinced that it works, right? But more importantly, we're coming out with the marketplace in the next version, which is in 3 months from now, where if you're going to have pre-built automation, the best of chatbots, the best of whatever you see out there. There are a lot of startups that are doing this, right? We then want to be that company that allows that. And as a third factor, be the Amazon of RPA, where we are the best in integrating anything that is the best out there. But we seamlessly bring it all together so you as a customer don't really see what's going on in the background. It all talks to each other. So you're free to bring your own BYOD in your own environment, yet have something that integrates pretty well. We already have deep level integration with SAP, with Oracle, with 27 other leading ERPs, on an API and otherwise, right? So that's what we will focus on, constantly improving the product. Now, to your point on AI, I think, like I said, the first step was computer vision, so we want to stay true to that. There's more improvements coming into how best the vision can be as close to the human vision, right? So any kind of unstructured data, looking into Citrix. Now, we already probably are the best in Citrix automation. We want to improve that further as well, because everything for a computer in a Citrix environment is an image. So, there's still the challenge with handwritings of doctors. So we have a lot of healthcare claims that come in written by doctors that are, how doctors' writing is. But there's one company that actually finally figured it out. So we're going to integrate that into our OCR engine to see if we can get better at that, right? From there, basically leading on to cognitive that we talked about, right? So for us, it is a phased improvement towards AI. So cognition now already has IBM Watson, Google Sentiment Analytics, or chatbots, right? From Humley, from Google Workflow.com, and so on and so forth. So there are a few products that we already incorporated. To Celonis, which is going to be on process mining, where the holy grail of bots building bots is going to be a reality in 6 months. So for us, I think the AI part comes in packages. We look at the input on the OCR, we look at the process on building process libraries or pre-built automation, to the last phase, which is really coming close to human decision making. And for us, funnily, I joined the company a year ago, and back then I think our roadmap was about 2.5 years. That's already gotten slashed into 6 months. So whatever we think is a couple of years away is getting accelerated within just a few months from now. So
yeah, it's the cascade effect that I think Jedediah earlier talked about, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask.
Plug.
Yeah,
It's a great plug for UiPath.
I know exactly. I think you took good advantage of that. I'm going to ask one more question and then open up for one or two from the audience. So how do you go about building this intelligent automation roadmap? And this is primarily for you both. Do you go the incremental route, start off, a few baby steps and then build on top, or you want to go more, big bang, let's do it all and try and get the maximum benefit from it?
Well, you need to start somewhere, and you need to have a strategy, in my opinion, of where you want to go and what you want to invest your time and resources in. Digital innovation is with us. It's undeniable, but it's still an evolution. You talked about OCR engines. I've got probably multiple processes where I think we probably get close to 15,000 paper credit disputes a day from folks who don't want to use the internet for one reason or another. And some of that is they're trying to game the process, but some of it's, you're and my parents that don't want to put their sensitive information out on the internet. We're still going to evolve into being able to take paper data or image type data and figure out what it is with automation. And I've seen it go from 50% capture rate to 60 to 70. It's getting better every day, which will create new opportunities. So I think your roadmap to AI is situationally specific. Every opportunity is different, and you have to assess where you're at. But you need to build a good foundation and build on that every day as you move towards more higher-end processes that you want to automate.
Don't just embrace technology because it's there. I think the business is to drive technology, and I think the author of the book Disruptor, Jedediah, he mentioned this. I think you need to know your what before you can decide how you want to do it. I think there are several ways that technology can actually help you, but what's the right use case? What's the right business case? How do you build that into the product? Don't just jump on it because you want to do something fancy in AI. So if you take a very use case centric approach, and this is what you want to do within the next 3 months, and now you want to expand upon it for the next 6 months. So that's kind of how the roadmaps are going to be shaped. I don't believe there is a big bang approach. I don't think there's a switch that you can say, hey, I'm just going to turn on AI and it's going to work automatically. Fortunately, there's no magic button unless UiPath is coming up with one.
The go button, right?
Yeah.